let's talk more about England and what England need to do now going into the next 3 tests. There has been so much talk about squad selection and who we're going to choose and how we're going to change things up and what it needs to be. And everyone's obviously got an opinion, and these things we've mentioned before can be very knee-jerky, particularly in Test cricket, which a lot of stuff can happen in 5 days. People can become heroes and villains very quickly. But there are some sort of familiar issues coming up. How would you change things going into the next test, going into the MCG?
I suppose going into the MCG with the series still live, I think this is the best time to make changes, even if they're changes that, maybe in a different setting, you might think, right, we should maybe be a bit more consistent. I think one of the changes they certainly will make with the batting in particular, because I suppose let's talk about form changes, as it were. So Ollie Pope out for Johnny Bairstow makes a bit of sense. They would touch and go between the two of them coming into the series. I think Ollie Pope, for all the runs he scored at the Oval and for all his, he's got an exceptionally high county championship average, it's just been found wanting outside off stump far too many times. And I think I wouldn't say Johnny Bairstow is necessarily like a totally, a huge upgrade on him, because if he was, he would have been playing. But I think that's a change that they will possibly make. I think they'll probably make. I would say the other change will come up top and will be Zach Crawley in for Haseeb Hameed rather than Rory Burns. I suppose Rory Burns has taken the heat as the person who, obviously dismissed first ball, all eyes are on him, dropped catch, had those issues with Stark and found some semblance to form in that second innings. But more so because a lot of the chat around Crawley as a hunch pick when he was first selected for England anyway was that he would suit Australian pitches. He's a tall guy, plays on the bounce really well. And there was, been some chatter out there that he's been looking good in the nets and practice games like that. And certainly England's bowlers have been quite impressed by him. And I see that as a move in particular because Hameed, while he hasn't necessarily done anything totally wrong, has come into this cycle into this Ashes cycle, per se, quite late. He wasn't pre-planned. It was only because Dom Sibley fell away during the India series, and then Zach Crawley himself was dropped, that Hameed came in, and then a little bit after that, Dawid Malan. So I think those will be the two changes that will come from the batting point of view. Yeah.
Kate, how do you see it?
I don't necessarily agree with dropping Haseeb. I think when you're talking about the Harris situation for Australia have got the luxury of their winning, so they don't need to change anything. Whereas obviously England, you're 2-0 down, and if you keep doing the same thing, it's that saying, isn't it? If you keep doing the same thing, it's insanity or something. I don't know. But
very famous.
Yeah, it was a good.
That's exactly how it is.
It's that good a saying that I know it off by heart. But I think the bowling attack, there's obviously been a lot of talk about having no spin on this pitch, and this was the pitch that we should have had the spinner on. But again, it's so easy to pick this stuff out in hindsight when we've lost. I think what England need to do is have real clarity when they go and look at the pitch at the MCG and pick the best team that they think will suit that pitch. They need to park the last 2 games now and selection debates, and they need to go in there and believe that they've got the best 11 to go and win that game, because they have to believe that they can do that. Otherwise, there's no point in them even turning up to the MCG.
Yeah, Steen, do you see it as we're talking about selection stuff, but it feels like it's so much more. And I guess from an outside perspective, when you don't have this sort of, how do you call it, like a partisan relationship with the team, and you think, oh yeah, well, it's got to be this, and this. You don't have that kind of immediate reaction. From outside, does it look deeper than just a selection problem?
Oh, that's too analytical for me, but I think you want to play with consistency and play with the same core group of players. And I think we spoke last time with Jason Roy during the first test of having that confidence from a coach or management to go, hey, no matter what happens, we're going to pick you for every test. And that mindset of a player will definitely help. I'm sure that you'd agree with that. Yeah. Like knowing no matter if I score hardly any runs, I'll always be picked. Having that inconsistency, or if I'm going to get to play Melbourne, Sydney or Hobart, it must play tricks on the mind. And there's no bigger game than a must-win at the MCG, opening day, Boxing Day test, 90,000 people. There's no bigger pressure for an England player, I think, than in 5 days' time, 6 days' time.
I do think that the change that they need in the bowling attack, they need to bring Wood back in, because they need that point of difference of the 93, 94 mile an hour, because there's been so much talk of the samey attack of Wokes, Anderson and Broad. So I would suggest bringing him in potentially for a Broad or an Anderson.
The wicketkeeper issue is one that's come up a lot. Bairstow obviously sitting there. Would Joss Buttler from however well you know him, do you think he'd have an issue with being made to be just a specialist batsman, or is it just something that has he become like a scapegoat for the Test?
I don't know him well enough to know how he would take that. I think as long as the communication from the coaches and the captain to Joss, if that was to be the case, as long as that is clear and why they're doing it, maybe to give him a little bit of respite from not needing to concentrate every single ball of a Test match. But I can't see them doing that. I can't see Bairstow coming in to keep. I think they'll keep Joss there because he is, for me, he is our best keeper batter. And I know he's taken the speckies and dropped the simple ones, but I still think he's got the ability to, you can't do the best without being able to do the good. So I do believe he's got the skill to be able to do that. He's just not shown it in this Test match.
Yeah.
One of the things they'll have to work out is, and I suppose, they've been around Butler long enough to know this, it's close to fact really, is that a lot of wicketkeeper batters in that, batters who become wicketkeepers, as it were, rather than a pure gloveman, they end up seeing the role as more of an all-rounder role. So they think, well, I haven't contributed here quite as well as I wanted to, but I can always do that. And they will have to weigh that up with Butler and know whether it is detrimental to take the gloves away from him. I mean, I agree with Craig. I don't think they're going to give the gloves to Bairstow because Bairstow is likely to come in. But, you wonder how much of what happened today was governed by Butler thinking, right, this is my chance to make amends in some way. Not that it should be for an England player to do well with the bat, they need to make a mistake elsewhere. Obviously, that's not ideal, but that's something that he'll have to consider, yeah.
Obviously, the last case scenario, now that the Lions have been sent home, which was always the plan, is picking players out of the Big Bash League. Do you think anyone there could make a difference? Is there, or is that just something that, again, has been sort of talked into existence by fans and pundits?
Well, I mean, I think logistically, it was really the only option once they sent the England Lions home. They were there to offer a practice initially, which didn't really come to fruition because of the bad weather when they arrived into Queensland, and also, in case of any injury as well. In terms of people at the Big Bash, I know there's a lot of talk about Saqib Mahmood. Is someone who is a little bit different. He's in that midway between England's right on medium fast bowlers and Wood. He's kind of an 87, 88 mile-an-hour bowler. He's got lovely action. He can generate a bit of his own natural swing from the arm with his lower arm. So that might be an option, but it feels like we're pressing the nuclear button a bit too early. I think there are options within this squad that need to be explored before you go outside it. But primarily anyone to come in will be from the BBL, yeah.
So